Love the Long Blue Leadership podcast? Then you'll want to discover Focus on Leadership, a Long Blue Leadership production from the United States Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Retired Naviere Walkewicz, class of '99, and I'm honored to host this newest evolution of Long Blue Leadership. Here on Focus on Leadership, we move beyond the why and dive into the how, exploring the habits, mindsets, and lessons that turn good leaders into great ones. Each episode, we'll sit down with accomplished Air Force Academy graduates to uncover their stories, insights, and real-world actions that drive excellence. Focus on Leadership, offering impactful and actionable lessons for today's exceptional leaders. Without further ado, enjoy this premiere episode of Focus on Leadership. Welcome to Focus on Leadership, where we take a close look at the practices that make strong leaders even stronger. I'm your host, Naviere Walkewicz, class of '99. Today, we're joined by Tanji Johnson Bridgeman, class of '97, an Air Force Academy graduate whose journey has taken her from aircraft maintenance officer to professional fitness champion, American gladiator known as Stealth, entrepreneur, and executive coach. Tanji is here to teach us about leadership through the lens of health and wellness, how caring for yourself physically and mentally fuels your ability to establish presence and lead others with confidence. Tanji, welcome to Focus on Leadership.
Thank you, Naviere. It is so good to be here.
Such an honor to see you. I mean, as a '99 graduate, to have a '97 trainer here in the presence, I'm already feeling wonderful. And, it's been about 10 years since you've been at your academy.
That's right.
How are you feeling? We came back last evening. What are your thoughts?
Wow. I was here 9 years ago for my 20th reunion. Mm-hmm. I just feel so much gratitude. I mean, it's so surreal. Even last night we went to work out and, you're driving up the hill towards Vandenberg and all these memories are coming back to me from the good times. But the biggest thing I'm feeling is pride, pride and gratitude because, we don't always reflect, but just being here, it forces you to reflect like this is where it all started. Right. I mean, it really started with my upbringing, but the Air Force Academy, my experience here laid the foundation for who I became, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, let's go back to the fact that right off the bat, you got off the plane, you met me, and we went to work out. So wellness, no joke, is right at the top of your foundation. So how did you get into this space? Let's kind of introduce that to our listeners because I think it's important for them to really understand the depth of what wellness means.
Well, the funny thing about it is I never would have imagined that I would be doing what I'm doing today because I was a diehard. I thought, I'm going in the military and I'm staying in for 20 years. So when I was here, I was on the Cadet Honor Guard and I cheered, and that's when I fell in love with lifting weights. So I got into competing, even as a lieutenant, and I fell in love and I turned professional. And so there was these transitions where I had an opportunity to be a professional athlete, and I took it, right? And so I became a professional bodybuilder, fitness champion, and then next thing you know, I'm on NBC's American Gladiators. That was wild. And so I did that for a while, and then I became a trainer and a coach and a promoter and a judge and did all the things bodybuilding. And then I retired in 2016, and that's around the time I met my husband. And so really that's when my real wellness journey began, because prior to that, it was heavily around physical fitness. But wellness for me began when I transitioned and retired from competing, and really I had to figure out what is my fitness life going to look like, because it's not going to be working out 3 times a day on a calorie deficient diet.
Yes.
And I became
3 times a day. Okay,
right. None of that. I was like, I'm done.
Yes.
But I really had to design the rest of my life and really figure out what that was going to look like. So I got into functional medicine health coaching. I married a chiropractor, so we believe in holistic medicine, and that's where it started.
Excellent. And so this is not a traditional career path. So let's kind of go back to the cadet mindset, for example. How would you, knowing what you know now, maybe talk to yourself as a cadet, or actually cadets that might be listening, of what they should be thinking about in this priority space of wellness in leadership?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. The disadvantage for young leaders, whether they're cadets or lieutenants, is that they don't have the luxury of having a lot of life experience. And so building a foundation is important, and it takes mindfulness and just what should we be aware of. So what I would want to impart on them is to adopt the philosophy of looking at wellness from a whole person approach, because high performance is going to demand it. And so when I say whole person, wellness is multidimensional. So we want to look at the mindset, we want to look at the body, and we want to look at the spirit, and being able to start from a place where you're going to go into all of those.
Well, as a cadet, there are so many hats they have to wear, no pun intended. They have to be on top of their game in the academic space. They have to be on top of their game in the military, and then also athletically. Can you talk about, or maybe share an example as a cadet, how you navigated that journey of wellness and what that looked like?
Well, let's go back to, so I didn't get a chance to break down. So mind, body, spirit. Why is that important? Because in any philosophies that we adopt, we have to really see where it's important. So when you think of what is an officer, what is a leader going to have to do with their mind? This is where they have to have clarity. It's going to help with focus, creativity to innovate new solutions. And so we need to be able to prioritize our mindset and our mental health. And then there's the body, right? So a lot of us are going to be going on deployments. We're going to work long hours. Our body is what's going to give us the fuel and energy and the stamina to get through a day. It's literally bringing our energy. And then you think about the spirit. And this one is really special, and it's probably the most neglected. So when you think about the spirit, this is where you're going to anchor in with your emotional health. What is your purpose? What is your why? Earlier today, I was having a great discussion with General Marks, and he shared with me that one of his goals for the cadets is that when they graduate, they're going to be committed to being leaders, but are they committed, like really committed and bought in to knowing what their purpose is going to be? And I think that a big part of that is being able to explore their spirit in advance so they can discover their identity and their strengths in advance, and to be able to go off into the leadership and fully own it. And so an example that I would like to present, when I was coaching bodybuilders and female athletes, I remember I started a team. And now this is going to be a team of women that they have the common goal of competing. So they're trying to pursue physical excellence with how they transform their physiques. But what I did was I brought this team together, this sisterhood of women. So a couple things that I wanted to see. I wanted sisterhood and support. I wanted them to have the commonality of the same goal. And I wanted them to be able to support each other. And I wanted to be able to support them by elevating their mindset. And so one of the things that I did that was really unique at the time that a lot of other coaches and leaders weren't doing, when somebody wanted to work with them, they just sign them up. But I would have a consultation. It was kind of more of an interview, because one of the questions I would ask is, Naviere, why do you want to compete? And then I'd give them examples like, is this a bucket list? Are you trying to improve your health? Is this for validation and attention? Is this because you're competitive? Because if you're competitive and you're telling me that you just started working out last year, maybe we need to wait a couple of years. You see what I mean? Yes. So when you go back to the why, it keeps you in alignment to move forward in alignment with your why. But a lot of people don't know what that is. And sometimes all it takes is asking the question.
So the question I'd love to ask you then is going back to the cadet side, because I think talking to General Marks and the purpose piece, you actually, I think as a cadet, remember, you were on honor guard. You were also a cadet. I think you were the cheer captain of our cheerleading team. I feel that is such a great testament to the fact that you have to figure out, the purpose of how do I do more and give more and still stay connected to my purpose of where you said in the beginning, I was going to serve 20 years in the Air Force.
Right.
How do our cadets get that same level of interview or coaching with someone without having that life experience yet? Like, what would you share with them now from your learned experience?
So when I think back to, so when you look at wellness and you think of mental wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness, I think what happens here at the Academy, and I remember starting this way, we prioritize physical fitness, right? I remember being in that fight or flight mode, like, okay, if I can just show that I am, prioritizing physical fitness, that strength is going to get me respect. And I could definitely feel the difference in how I was treated. The problem sometimes with prioritizing physical fitness is great because, it can strengthen your mind. So if your body's feeling strong, your mindset is strong, but it becomes problematic when your body fails. So what happens when you fail? And I have plenty of stories and memories, my goodness, of being on honor guard. One that I remember distinctly is, if you had me doing push-ups or pull-ups, I was in a zone, I was impressing everybody, I was passing all the tests, but you put me in a formation where the short people are in the back, you throw a helmet, M1 Garand, and we have to go run 3 miles now. Now I'm falling out and I'm getting exhausted. And the body goes, the stress goes up, the blood sugar goes down. It's just physiology, right? And so what happens is now mentally, my mind is becoming weak. So when the body fails, my mind is getting weak.
And you'd been training your body.
Right.
Training. Right.
And so I look back and I remember those days in Honor Guard where I would feel doubt. Like, am I going to make it? Do I deserve to be here? Am I good enough? I would feel discouraged, right? And I would go back to my room and then something happened. So after about 2 weeks of suffering through this pain and this big challenge, I remember thinking, gosh, every time they beat me down physically, I feel so weak mentally. But I was in my room and I remember having anxiety for the next day, like, oh, I'm going out there again. And for some reason, that meme, with the Asian guy that says, but did you die?
Oh, yes,
right? That's
yes.
always in my head. And I remember saying that to myself, like, it was hard. Today was hard, but did I die? No.
Right.
And actually, after 2 weeks, I'm like, it's actually getting easier, like, because I'm getting more fit, right? I'm able to do the push-ups, I'm running further. And I remember that was the mindset shift where I realized, okay, now tomorrow when I go out to practice, I'm not going to be as afraid because I've already decided that I can do hard things. And so now when I was enduring the practice, right, and the leadership of my Honor Guard cadre, I was prepared with that mental strength, right?
Right.
And so that's what we need. We need to be able to train so that when our body fails, our mind prevails, right?
I love that. Those 3 facets of wellness, and that's a really strong way to explain it. And so you gave a couple of examples about when the body fails. So when we think about how we're wired, and I think many of us are this way as cadets, as graduates, as those who really want to succeed in life.
Right.
Thinking about resilience, how do we balance, or maybe balance isn't the right word, but how do we make sure we're very mindful of that line between healthy discipline and then harmful overdrive?
Right.
How do you navigate that? And maybe what would you share with some of our listeners?
Well, you were asking, like, how do we recognize when it's happened? The good news is your body will leave clues. You will have emotional clues. You will have physical clues. You're going to have behavioral clues. Your body will leave clues. So the first thing is, I think that if we can be willing to evolve, look at what culture are we in. Now, like you and I, we come from a culture where the philosophy was grit at any cost. Push, 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 and drive, drive, drive. I think about as an athlete, especially if you're motivated, you're thinking, when I was training my body, I remember thinking, I want to get these results, and so I'm going to do what it takes.
Right.
So every day, I'm doing the lifting, I'm eating the food, and I'm going to train every day. And I remember on that 7th day, I had done all the things. I took the supplements, I got all the sleep, and I went in to train, and my body was exhausted. And it's because I was physically burning out, and my body needed the rest. And then it really transferred into how I would choreograph my training. And so with routines, so I was a fitness competitor. I did these crazy fitness routines where I'm doing push-ups and squats and gymnastics and flying around, right?
Yes.
And it's 2 minutes long. So think of doing like a crazy CrossFit routine for 2 minutes straight without stopping and smiling. And so I remember being strategic, right, in how I would lay out those practices athletically, where I would do a portion 30 seconds. I would train 30 seconds at a time, and then the next day I would do the next 30 seconds. A week later, I would go for about a minute. But the part I want you to know is right before the competition, I would decrease that training load. I would actually do less, because the year that I trained full out all the way up into the competition, I didn't do well on stage because my body was exhausted. So again, our body is going to leave us clues, and we have to be willing to evolve to say that self-care, it's not selfish, but it's strategic, right? And so we need to pay attention to those signs, because we're going to have a choice to either pivot and be intentional and strategic with taking care of ourselves, or we're going to stay stuck in this old school thinking that's not going to serve us.
So if it's not the body telling you, because we talk about how wellness is more than just physical, how do you recognize signs on the spiritual side, on your emotional side, that you might be in this harmful space of it's too much give and not enough fill.
I think that's a great question. So here's some telltales. So going back to physical, like the examples I gave, you're going to feel exhausted. You're going to have muscle tension. You might even start to have stomach issues. Those are all great physical signs that you're reaching burnout. Now, when you think of mentally, if you notice emotionally and mentally that you start getting irritable, and you've become more impatient and you're having a harder time making decisions, those are also great clues that mentally you're starting to get burnt out. And then when you think of behaviorally, let's say you had a great morning routine and now all of a sudden you find yourself in this season where you've abandoned that. Or you have deadlines that you're usually very productive and you can get things done, but now you're starting to procrastinate and you're thinking like, who am I right now? I'm procrastinating. I've abandoned my wellness routine. I don't even have a morning routine. That's when you should really step back. And I think one of the practical tools that everyone can do is check in with themselves on a regular basis. Okay. So I'm being very transparent. I check in with myself daily. So let's say I do 3 back-to-back hours of Zoom calls. Maybe one's with an executive coaching client. Maybe another one is a team Zoom where I'm training a group of folks, and then another team meeting. After that 3 hours, I will stop and I'll check in with myself and I'll take a deep breath and say, how am I feeling? Do I feel like getting right back on a call? No, my brain is fried right now. And then I'll pivot and I'll go take a 10-minute walk around break. And that's just one of my strategies.
Right. So a check-in doesn't have to be this grand, I take time off and I spend a week It literally could just be a few minutes of and check in with yourself, just
exactly.
like you said. And because I think sometimes time is a challenge as well, right? We talk about how do we prioritize all these things, and we're within this 24-hour period. How do we make sure that the time piece is something that we can also utilize to take care of ourselves? And so the fact that you said it doesn't have to take a lot of time to check in.
And think about it. So we just talked about how to check in with yourself daily. What about like in your career? I was helping physique athletes with poise mastery, basically teaching posing to athletes for over 15 years.
Right.
And towards the end of that career, what I started to notice when I would mentally check in with myself is I would notice that as I was driving to the office to go work with another client, I just did not feel as energized.
Interesting.
I didn't feel as passionate. My motivation was going down. And this was a sign for me that I was getting burnt out from this specific way of serving.
Okay.
And it was my first clue that it was time to pivot and to look at something else.
That's really interesting because, when you think about when you're making big decisions, whether in career, whether in leadership, or just, the fact that you have these signs help you make those decisions. But I also wonder if it helps you at times think about part of the growth is maybe not totally pivoting, but it's recognizing that I'm supposed to go through this period of hardship. Right. So what I'm kind of alluding to right now is failure, right? So failure as we go through some of our experiences are inevitable.
Right.
How do we make sure we're using failure in a way to grow as opposed to the easy button of, well, I failed, so I'm pivoting? You know what I mean? Okay.
So that would be like a reaction.
Right.
You're reacting to what happened, and you think what you need to do is flee from it. And so you have to be able to discern, am I pivoting because I'm afraid, or because I feel like I'm not good enough, or because my purpose and my spirit is telling me that my work is done here and I'm looking for innovation. I'm looking for something new. I'm looking to impact new people. So going back to failure, like public speaking, it's one of the top 2 fears, right?
Yes.
But why
What's the other?
Oh, public speaking?
Yes.
Flying? Swimming? No, I'm just kidding. Only if you grew up like me. But going back to failure, I think that people fear failure a lot because they make the mistake of connecting it to their identity. Instead of realizing failure is an event.
Okay.
It's not your identity. And so how many times do we do something and maybe it's a competition or it's an event or an application and you fail.
Right.
You don't get the desired result. It's an event. So what we need to do is reframe failure as feedback. That's it. So I have a great example. When I think about a great example of someone who was able to show in person, in reality, that when they failed, it did not disrupt their identity at all. So I don't know if there's any boxing fans out there, but I know.
Oh, we have some, I'm sure.
So
yes.
the Canelo and Crawford fight, it was a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Did you see that?
I didn't, but I did hear about this, yes. Actually,
Okay.
honestly, I fell asleep. I planned to watch it with my husband. My husband watched it, but I fell asleep.
Oh, they went all the rounds,
Yes,
right? It was a great fight. Really, really great. You saw two physical specimens, at the top of their game. They were both undefeated. I believe Canelo was favored to win.
Okay.
But he didn't. He lost the belt, right? And so Crawford wins.
Right.
And so I'm always very intrigued with how people respond to failure when it's public, right?
Okay.
And so Crawford got to make his speech, and then when Canelo made his speech, one of the first things they ask is, okay, so you didn't get the result you were hoping for, you didn't win this bout, how are you feeling? And he gave an answer that I totally didn't expect. He said, I feel great.
Just like that.
Yes, he was like, I feel great.
Wow.
He was like, it was a great fight. He affirmed Crawford, edified him, talked about how great he was, but he maintained his identity, and you could feel that in his spirit. He said, I feel great. I came out here. I did a great job. I did what I was supposed to do. Obviously, there's room for feedback to learn, I didn't get the result I wanted. So whether it was endurance or I wasn't strategic enough or I didn't prioritize my offense, there's feedback there, and he's going to learn from that.
Right.
But he basically had such a great attitude, and he ended it by saying, I felt great, and it was a great time. And I remember thinking, like, wow, now there's an example of someone who did not own the failure and make it a part of his identity. It was just an event.
Right.
And his legacy will still be restored.
Right.
And to be honest with you, it made me think about my own career.
Yes. So have you experienced anything like that in your career?
Have I experienced failure?
Yes.
Over and over again.
And how did you respond in your, the wellness side of it when you think about, what you're trying to do, your purpose? How did you use that? Did you use it as feedback, or what did that look like for you?
So let's say in sports, if you don't win, then that event is deemed as a failure, right?
Right.
And so if you think about it, I've done 54 professional bodybuilding fitness competitions.
Okay, what year did you start? Just so
I
we can
started
put
in
this perspective.
2001.
Okay.
And retired in 2016, so about 17 years.
Wow.
And I won 11 of them.
Wow.
So that means and that's a lot,
Yes,
actually.
yes, it is.
So out of that many, that means I lost all the others. And there's one particular competition that will always be dear to my heart, and it was the Arnold Classic. Yes. The Arnold Schwarzenegger. He has this gigantic competition every year. And midway through my career, I got in the top 5.
Right.
And so I would get 4th, and then the next year I'd get 3rd, and then
my
I'd
goodness.
go down to 4th, and then I'd get 2nd.
Right.
I think I got 2nd maybe 4 years in a row. So basically, in my 10th year of competing, I finally won the darn thing.
Wow.
Right? So Arnold comes coming across the stage, and I'm already crying, and, with his accent, why are you so emotional? And there's a picture of me taking the microphone from him because I had something to say.
Right.
And in that moment, because it was a special moment, I realized, yes, all of these years of failure, every time I competed, I missed the mark. But what did I do? I took that feedback and I went back and said, what do I need to do differently? What does this mean? How can I improve my physique? How did I need better stamina to end my routine? And every year I was coming back better and better and better. But guess what? So were the other athletes. Right? And so when I won in that 10th year, I actually would not have had it any other way because I don't think it would have meant as much to me because what was happening, I may have won the Arnold Classic on that day, but I was becoming a champion throughout that whole 10-year process. You see what I did there?
I do.
So it's not your identity, it's an event. So if you look at it and reframe it as feedback, then you can leverage that and use it as an opportunity to win.
So failure, and we're going to say synonym, feedback.
Exactly.
I like that.
I mean, and I'll give you another example. So, I did my first TEDx talk last year, and I was a part of this coaching group. And here's the thing, as leaders, we get to create and build culture. And I think it's very important for leaders to create a culture where they normalize failure and they teach their teams that it's meant to be for feedback. So encourage courage, right? And then help them leverage the failure or the mistake as lessons learned so that they can grow and move forward. So I'm in this coaching group, and they told us, we're going to have you send out probably an average of 80 applications. Now we're going to guide you and tell you what to do, but every application is different because the event promoters are different.
Right.
So we can't tell you exactly what they all want, but you're going to find out when you apply. So I remember applying, I think, to UCLA Berkeley or something, and I applied to do a TEDx talk. And midway through my application, they asked me, what was my scientific evidence and proof of my theory and my great idea? And I didn't have one at the time. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to go ahead and finish this application, but yay, I just got some feedback that I need to include scientific data in my pitch and in presenting my idea. And it was shortly after, I think I did 5 more applications and I got selected. And so now I have been so trained to see failure as an opportunity to grow and excel that when I am afraid of something, I reframe it immediately. And then I actually look forward to it. Like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get out there and do this thing because I'm going to get this feedback and that's going to make me better.
Well, I think that's really wonderful in the way that you frame that because, you know, in the military, and I was actually just at a conference recently, and they were talking about how failure should be a part of training. Failure is actually the most important part of the training because when it comes time to actual execution operationally, that's when we can't fail, right? So like you want that feedback through all those training iterations. And so, you know, the way you just laid that out for us, it was in a sense that, you had this framework, I'm getting feedback, I'm training.
Right.
And then, of course, when you took the champion spot,
well, and I love, I think back to when I physically learned to appreciate failure was through weight training. And I know you've done it too, because can you go back and remember the first time? As a bodybuilder, when you lift weights, you're trying to grow your muscle, and to grow the muscle fibers have to tear. And so there has to be a certain level of intensity and hardship in doing that. So if you're one of those people that you go to the gym and you're doing, 15 easy reps, 4 sets, you never break a sweat, you're toning and you're getting some movement in, but you're not tearing your muscle fibers, and that's probably why they're not growing. Right. So when I worked with the trainer and we were doing overhead military presses, and I physically felt like I was done at about 12 reps, but he was spotting me. So he just kept force repping me through 6 to 8 more, until my arms were done. And I put my arms down and they started to float up in the air. And he looks at me, and because I'm looking at him like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, wow, are you trying to hurt me? And he just said, no, but I do need you to learn that you're going to have to fail in order to grow and win. And I was like, So then after that, we're going in the gym like, all right, Naviere, we're going to hit failure today. Yeah, we're going to learn how to fail. Did you fail at the gym last night? Yes, I did. So in the bodybuilding community, it's celebrated. Right. It's a concept where we're trying to work through failure because we know what's on the other side.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, and then you said you retired in 2016. So that was probably quite a transition in the fact where you had to, you probably have been doing all the wellness check-ins. Where am I at? What am I thinking? Right. How did you make that transition into the executive presence space? Because it doesn't seem like it's a direct correlation from someone bodybuilding to executive presence, or maybe it is.
So in bodybuilding, I developed a niche. So I started off as a trainer, and then very quickly, probably because of some of my honor guard background, we did precision drill, and I just realized that I learn things really easily, and then I can teach it. I can see something and break it down in detail and teach it. And so I got really good at doing that for the athletes, for posing, to where I was able to build a whole career and get paid really well through poise mastery. Now, what I think, when I think back to all the things we had to do as a cadet, from standing at attention, keeping your chest, your chin in, projecting, we were already starting to work on our executive presence, but we just didn't realize it, right? And so in the real world, outside of the military, where people are not building habits of standing up straight on a regular basis, they don't. Right. I go into boardrooms, I go to events where I see people get on stage, they're looking down, they're fidgeting, they're not making eye contact, they're speaking too softly. And so executive presence is the ability to project confidence in how you show up and the way that you communicate and how you get people to experience you. Because unfortunately, we live in a society where perception shapes opportunity. So as a leader, if you're not commanding that authority right off the bat, you may be missing the mark on being able to influence, and that's what leadership is. And so I was basically elevating all of these athletes to just present the best version of themselves. And in leadership, that's what we want too. We all have strengths. We all have learned skills. We all have something to offer. But if we're not projecting and presenting our inner power externally, a lot of times we miss that mark. And I want to connect the dots. And that's kind of what hit me when I thought about moving into the executive space is, I can teach you how to stand in front of a red carpet and some power poses, but it goes beyond that. It's how we communicate. It's our body language. And so there's a lot of skills that can be learned.
Well, let's start with maybe just sharing a couple. How can our leaders, our listeners, start to display a stronger executive presence every day? What's a first couple things you might have them start thinking about?
Okay, so physically, I would start, let's say with body language, is eye contact. So my concern with the generation that we have now is they're dealing with a disadvantage that we didn't have to deal with. When we were in school together 20 years ago, we were connecting all the time. It wasn't even a challenge. We were always together in person, building relationship, connecting, communicating. And now we're in a digital world where our attention is we're fighting for it, right? And so a lot of times I will watch people and I realize whether they're going out to dinner and they are not maintaining eye contact because they're distracted and they really haven't been trained to really be present. So for example, when you're speaking with someone and you're making eye contact with them, they feel seen.
Right.
And so that's one of the strongest ones.
Okay, I like that a lot. That's perfect. So as they're starting to think about the first thing is being present and making eye contact that's a physical standpoint. Maybe what from a mental or emotional standpoint should they be doing from a starting point for executive presence? Okay,
so being intentional. So when you think about you're a leader, and let's say you're going to speak in front of the cadet wing, or you're going to start managing a team, or you're going to a networking event as an executive, and you're trying to pick up a few sponsors. Before you even go to the event, you can be intentional about who am I meeting with, what is my goal, and how do I want them to feel? So when you think about networking, a lot of times there's people, I have a client, she hired me because she has a little bit of social anxiety. Mm-hmm. She's younger, and so she's on a board where everybody's older than her. Okay. So there's a little bit of that mental insecurity of, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? Are these people going to respect me? Right? And so she's coming into the situation already insecure. And she's thinking about herself. How am I going to be perceived instead of going there focused on connection?
Right.
So if she was to go there and say, this is who's going to be there, this is how I want to make them feel. So I'm actually going to be very intentional about asking questions that's going to connect with them, that's going to make them feel a certain way. If I want this audience to feel respected, what do I ask them and what do I say? What do I highlight? If I want them to feel accepted and warm, what can I say? And so it just gives you more power to show up, be present, and be intentional, and you'll feel more confident because now you've taken the focus away from yourself to how you're going to serve others.
That is excellent. And that leads us into a bit of the mental piece of it, right? The mindset. So earlier you talked about how you had a mindset shift when you were getting beat down in honor guard. You're in the back, because of the vertical challenge, and you were running, and you're hanging in there, and you got better.
Well, it makes me think about when I was auditioning for American Gladiators. Okay. And again, I'm going to go back to this executive presence and where I use my mental training to serve me. So when I was auditioning, so if you guys don't remember, the old show there was no water, right? It was just, everything was over big, pillows and just a flat area.
Okay.
So when I went in there to audition, I remember there was, for the sake of diversity, there was like two of everything. There was two black women there. Mm-hmm. There was two redheads, two blondes. And I remember looking around thinking, okay, both of us are not getting this job. And so the very last part of the audition, after many rounds, is you had to go in front of the executive committee, mm-hmm. and you had a 1-minute pitch. You could say whatever you want, but they're all sitting there with their arms crossed, and you just get to go in there. And I remember thinking, okay, I am shorter than her, but I'm more muscular. And, she's been on tons of fitness magazines. She's, super beautiful, more popular. I want to go in there and I want to be intentional about showing them that what I'm going to present is the right fit for the show. And so I walked in there and I called the room to attention.
Oh,
right?
boy.
I used my honor guard diaphragm
Yes.
and I called the room to attention. And then I went in and I started telling them about how during basic training, I was like one of the pugilistic champions. And they thought that was great because we had an event for that, right? And so, going back to that mental training, part of it is just that intention of being prepared. What is it that you want to achieve? What are you going to do? And then you strategize and have a game plan for how you're going to go in there. Now, another example. So once I got the job, yay,
Yes.
right? And then we go to Sonu Studios and I look at the set and I realize that half of the set is over water. So half of the events, the joust, hang tough, the rock climbing, it's all over water. And you guys remember when I talked about a little bit not being a big swimmer? Oh my gosh. And so this was fascinating to me, but I didn't want anyone to know because I didn't want to lose my job. Right. And so here's where I tapped into my mental and mindset training. Right. So as an athlete, I did this a lot to preserve my physical body because of all the gymnastics and routines. I didn't overtrain because there's damage when you overtrain, but I would visualize myself going through my movements and I would picture myself being successful. So I didn't visualize myself messing up or anything like that.
Right.
And there would be repetition after repetition after repetition. And so what I did to face that fear of having to do events that were going to land me in the water is I had to use logic. So I literally would say, okay, if I end up being in the joust and I get hit, I'm going to fall in the water. And this is how far away the edge of the pool is. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a deep breath. I know how to do the strokes. I'm going to get over there. But I had to visualize myself falling. And then I used logic to just keep myself calm. So I visualized myself hitting the water and being calm. Because I would prepare myself to be calm. If I wasn't, I probably would have panicked and drowned. Mm. And so I think back to that, and I never told anybody, but I was ready. And I was not afraid because I had already went through the mental training to prepare myself to do something that I was uncomfortable doing.
And so did you fall into the water, and did it play out the way that you had mentally prepared it to?
So here's what's crazy. I'm probably not even supposed to talk about this, but the way they film some of these shows, they're not in sequence.
What?
No.
Okay.
So imagine that I'm filming a water event from episode 1, 3, and 8.
Okay. Wow.
Well, for me, like my third day there, I actually tore my ACL falling off the pyramid.
Oh my goodness.
And so, those viewers at home didn't know that.
Right.
So actually the answer is no. I actually didn't even get put into a water event because I got injured beforehand, but I was ready mentally regardless. I was actually disappointed because I was ready to see that courage come to the surface.
Oh my goodness. These are all such wonderful examples of how you have really almost embodied wellness throughout your decisions as a leader throughout your career. I'm really curious as you think about how you've been true to yourself in this journey, because there's an authenticity to you that only Tanji could bring. And so I'm wondering, how do you know who is your authentic self as a leader, and how have you continued to really show up for yourself in that way?
I think this is very important, and my heart goes out to the young leaders because, again, like I was saying earlier, they haven't had the experience yet. And I even remember when my younger sister, she was struggling to figure out what she wanted to do for a living. And she was a college graduate and she still didn't know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is because when you don't have that personal life experience, experience is a teacher. It tells you, it leaves clues. So when you don't have that, you kind of feel like you're just shooting from the hip trying to figure it out.
Right.
And so what I think is important is to start the art of self-reflection early. I'll never forget, I was on a TDY during the Kosovo crisis. I was at RF Mildenhall, and I was a maintainer, and I remember having, I think over 200 troops over there, but it was kind of a lonely season for me because all my peers were pilots and they were off flying, and, I didn't have anyone to hang out with, and I wasn't home. I was TDY, so I remember just spending my time. I would go to the gym, and then I would go for walks, and I did a lot of journaling, and I don't know why I had the foresight then, but I would ask myself questions like, who am I? What matters to me? what values are important to me. And the process of doing that really helped me solidify my identity. And so, for example, I knew that I thought self-love was really important to me. It was a value that I care about. So when I see people that are self-deprecating, they're talking poorly about themselves, they don't believe in themselves, this hurts my soul. It's a part of who I am, right? And so I've always believed in self-acceptance. For me as a Christian, I want to celebrate how God made me and have that level of self-love. So when I was a cheerleader at the Air Force Academy, I remember I didn't have self-esteem issues with my body image, nothing about it, right? And then I go off and I become a professional fitness competitor. Now I'm competing. And in that industry, breast implants were very prevalent and they were starting to get really popular.
Right.
And it made me really insecure. So if you think about it, I did not change, but my environment changed. So as leaders, how often are we going to be in situations where your environment is constantly changing and maybe you feel that pressure to conform?
Right.
And so in my environment, most of the women around me, as a means to an end, were getting breast implants to change how their body looked, to look more feminine, to be more accepted. And there's nothing wrong if that's what you want to do, but I remember feeling like now I'm insecure about my body. Now I don't feel as pretty. Now I don't feel as feminine. And I remember that being problematic because it wasn't in alignment with my identity. And so again, knowing what my values are, I thought, well, I could go get the operation like a lot of people do, but this is problematic because I don't want to lead a life. And how am I going to go back and coach other women and lead a team if now what I'm saying is whatever is true to who you are in your identity, it's okay to abandon that. And so for me, that's why I chose not to have that surgery. And I started this journey. It took about 2 years of being able to redefine beauty, redefine femininity. And this is kind of where all the different tools came in. So I started looking in the mirror and I would do positive self-talk. Instead of looking at my chest and saying, you're flat and it looks masculine and you're not feminine enough, I would say, girl, do you know what this chest can do? It can do crazy push-ups. And I would say, wow, you're strong. And over time, I changed how I felt about myself. And it was a very proud moment for me because I look back and that's why identity is so important. You need to take the time to reflect on who you are, what do you stand for, so that when those moments of pressure come, you're going to be able to make a decision to stay in alignment with who you are.
So you said and maybe it's by grace, you hadn't really planned. You started journaling in those moments of quiet when you're feeling a little bit alone as on TDY. Is that the best way you think to spend some time figuring out, who you are, what's important to you, or are there other tools that you might suggest to folks as well?
There's going to be multiple tools. For me, I like to write. For some people, they will pray. And they would just ask, a higher being to guide me and to make things, make me more aware, make things known to me. For other people, they're going to meditate. I liked journaling. I also have the strength of curiosity. And so because of that, I was always not only asking myself a lot of questions, but I was asking other people too. And so, for example, if people don't have that strength of curiosity and they're thinking, I really don't reflect very much, and I'm never asking myself those questions. You don't necessarily have to journal it, but you can just take time to spend in reflection. But, some of the work that I do, I take people through identity activation drills where I will list several different lists of values, different lists of strengths, and they'll think about each one, and they'll really start to think about, let me think of a time where I experienced one of these strengths, or what's the last thing that somebody celebrated, or what do people tend to tell me and compliment? And then all of a sudden they realize, I didn't realize this was a strength, but wow, this is a strength. And now they can own it because they're aware of it.
That is outstanding. So you've really taken wellness into practice in everything that you've done. You've started to elevate others around you to have this ability to discover themselves and then to have this executive presence. In all of the things that you're doing, it takes energy. How are you because I know that you talked about not overtraining and making sure you preserve that and doing mental reps. Is that really the special sauce, is the mental, training so that you don't find yourself in a period where you just lack energy and burnout?
So basically, how do you sustain energy when it comes to wellness?
Yes.
So again, you go back to mind, body, and spirit. So what I would do is and this is for each person, you just break it down. You ask yourself, okay, mind, how am I going to keep energy in my mind? Like what can I do? One of the easiest things to do is to just take a short break. So when I gave you the example of how my mind was working at full capacity for 3 hours straight. So when I was done, it needed a bit of a reset. And so what I do every day when I'm at home is I go outside and I visit with my chickens. So I have chickens and I have four cats. And so I will take a mental break, and it's a habit for me now. I get up from the table and I will walk, because it decreases your stress hormones when you have movement. And I will give my mind a break, and I will allow myself to observe. And so that's my favorite thing. I call it mindful walks, where I just go outside and I will just take a moment. And you know when they say like stop and smell the roses? No, seriously.
Right, or the chickens.
Yeah, exactly. So the chickens make me smile, because when I come out there, I typically have treats, but they just come, they bum rush me. And so I go out there and they make me smile, and then something wondrous will happen. Like maybe I see my cat just sprinting up a tree, and I'm just thinking, wow, what a hunter, right? Like they're so fast. And then, I see my dahlias that have been sprouting, and I just can't believe how fast they grow overnight with sunshine, and that's just 10 minutes. And then I come back in and I instantly feel recharged, and I sit down and I'm restored and ready to focus again on the next task. So mentally, I like taking breaks. Now, when it comes to physically, just getting into movement. And, a lot of times people will think, well, I don't have time to go to the gym for an hour. And
I'm
that's
tired already. How am I supposed to go work out?
Exactly.
Yes.
So when I think about the body, there's 4 pillars that you can focus on. And if you feel like you're not mastering any of them, just start with one. So food is one. Food is fuel, right? And then you have hydration. My husband's mom actually went to the hospital because she works all the time, and she had been out in the sun, and we discovered that she was dehydrated. And it put her in the hospital. And so sometimes when we're going after the mission and we're doing one task after, when people forget to drink water, and 8 hours later, you're dealing with brain fog, you're irritable, you don't understand what's happening, but you didn't fuel the body.
Right.
So hydration, movement, food, and sleep. So those are like the 4 pillars. And I would just ask yourself, so if I'm working with a health coaching client, I would say, out of those 4 areas, where do you want to start? And they'll say sleep. My sleep health is terrible. And then I can take it a step further and say, have you heard of a thing called sleep hygiene? They're like, what's that? Sleep hygiene is literally, what is your sleep ritual? What are your habits to prepare for bedtime? Do you have a consistent bedtime? Do you decrease blue light therapy? Do you put the phone away? Do you take a bubble bath to relax? When you think about your environment and what your habits are, when some people tell you, I do not feel rested, we look at their sleep hygiene.
Right.
What's going on? There's things that we can fix, and that's just with sleep.
Right.
And so I ask people, where would you like to start? And you just pick one habit that you can commit to over time. And once you master that, you start to habit stack.
Amazing. So we talked about from the energies when it comes to your physical and then your mental. What about from the spiritual side?
Okay, so and I think this is important because, again, I talk about how the spirit is the anchor for your emotional health, right? And so you want to think about activities that's going to feed your soul and your spirit. Now, I'll give an example. If you're going through, let's say, a season where you're irritable and you're feeling ungrateful and you're pessimistic and everything just seems bad, right? We're actually kind of in a season like that right now sometimes. One of the things I do, so this is just an exercise, but it's a gratitude process, but to write down 100 things you are grateful for.
100.
100. It took me I did this for 3 months straight. It took me about 20 minutes, but I got really good at it. And when you have to list out 100 things, at first you might do 20 and you're like, all right, where do I go from here? But you're forced to dig deeper. And when I came up with my 100 list, first of all, I would think about my husband. And I would 10 things. I would get specific. Grateful for his provision, grateful for his support, for his sense of humor, his hot, fit body. You know, I would just go down all the things, right? And then, you know, and so and then every day I'm grateful for my home, for my physical ability, for my flexibility, my mobility. You're just in a different frame of mind. And anyone can get there if they choose to do an exercise or a prompt that shifts them from their current circumstance. And that's why I'm most passionate about empowering people that they truly can design their life utilizing these tools.
Can you share an example when you've seen someone that is maybe in that season?
What kind of season? Negative
in
season?
In the negative season, and how going through some of these kind of wellness check-ins or activities, what did it allow them to do? Like, what did it open on the other side that changed for them with your help?
Okay, so one example would be we have social media and we have digital devices.
Right.
And we can easily, everything is about habit management. And that's one thing that I would tell people to do. You know, like if you were to take inventory, look at how you live your life every day. And if you were to put every single action you did down as a habit, right? Brush your teeth is a habit. Stop by and grab the Diet Coke is a habit. Sit down on the couch to watch TV is a habit. If you were put it in a category of what serves you, what doesn't serve you, you know, one of the most...
first list out all your habits and then categorize them.
Right.
Okay.
So then you would recognize, oh my goodness, I have a habit of scrolling Instagram or social media. And then you ask yourself, well, how much time do you spend doing that? Oh, probably I get caught into a loophole, 30 to 45 minutes. And then what are you consuming? You know, so let's say with the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks, you know, let's say something negative happens in society that's getting a lot of public attention and you're just in a rabbit hole of reading about that incident over and over and over again. And when you're done scrolling, the question is, how do you feel when after that activity? Mm-hmm. And most people would say, I feel tense, I feel angry, I feel disappointed. You know, they list out all of these negative feelings. And so what I do is I help them realize, okay, so does that serve you? You know, so because you were in this negative health space, when you went into dinner with your family or when you went into this next assignment, how did you show up? How did you perform? Right? Mm-hmm. And then they realize, oh, wow, I'm not very well. I treated my wife like crap because I was irritable. Mm-hmm. And so then you go back again, your experience, we leave clues with how we're living our life. So then you go back and you realize that is a habit I need to change. And I just need to make a decision. And I have to have a compelling reason. So let's say you want to work on your marriage and you want to show up better for your spouse, but you're always showing up with negative energy because of this habit that you do, right? When you get home, then you can, so we just come up with a plan. And it's different for each person. You know, what could you do that would be more positive? I could come home, play a game with my kid because, you know, my kid is amazing and he makes me smile and laugh and you're in a good mood. You know, and this is why if I am stressed during the day, I already know if I get exposed to my chickens and my cats, right? Or just go outside. I'm so mesmerized by the beauty of nature. All of those things I know fill me in a positive way. And so I'm very intentional and aware of when I need to shift, and I know what my go-to are. So when I work with clients, I help them discover what their database of go-tos are going to be. The first part is just helping them become more aware of when it's happening so they can decide to shift.
Right. So that awareness is really critical, but then the next step is probably the discipline in actually doing something about it.
Right.
How can you take the lessons that you've had in bodybuilding and then, you know, in all of your journey to help those now move from the awareness bucket to actually making change?
Making it happen.
Yes.
So I think the first goal should be consistency, not perfection. Right. And I learned this the hard way as a bodybuilder because in the beginning of my career, I hated dieting. I've always hated dieting. I love food. I don't mind being.
You and I are kindred spirits.
Yes, I don't mind being on a structured, meal plan, but being on a strict diet can be hard. Mm-hmm. So anytime you set a goal to do something that is difficult, the first thing that I tried to do was be perfect. So I would hire a coach, and my nutritionist would tell me, "This is what you're supposed to eat for meal 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly down to the macros." And maybe I would do great for 3 days, and then, I would fail. I would cheat or have something I'm not supposed to have, and I would feel so bad. Again, going back to a lot of these principles are coming back up. I was letting the failure identify me as a bad person. So now I'm feeling shame, and that's making me feel discouraged. And I kept doing this thing like, well, I blew it, so I'm just going to take the whole day off. Like how dumb is that, right? Like there's 4 more meals you can eat, and you're just going to sabotage the rest of the 4. So think about if I did that every day. So if you messed up every day and you sabotage 3 out of the 6 meals every single day, where would you be at the end of the week?
Worse off.
Fat? No, I'm just kidding.
Worse off than you were when you started, yes.
You would be with no results,
Maybe
right?
you had no more Oreos in the house, so you wouldn't have to worry about eating them anymore.
So that's when I realized, I'm getting caught up with perfection, and that's causing me to sabotage. So then I changed. I said 80-20, 90-10. I just want to be consistent. And so when you fail, you give yourself that grace, right? Mm-hmm. And so I always like to say courage, grit, and grace. You have to have the courage to do something uncomfortable, the grit to endure, and then the grace to embrace when you've messed up and then move forward. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I would do with wellness habits is, you build one habit at a time and you do what you can to be consistent. And when you fail, again, here's that theme. You take that failure as feedback. Why did you fail? Did you get hungry? Did you have temptation in the house? Did you not set your alarm, right? What could you do differently? And then you just recommit to being consistent.
That is excellent. So talking about everything, this has been a wonderful conversation. When I think about lasting impact, right? So, you've had this incredible journey. You've helped people understand how to be more aware of their wellness, how to take action, be consistent, and really drive change. What is one challenge you might have our listeners take in the wellness capacity to improve themselves as leaders or in their own professional journeys?
I love this question. So this is a very easy framework that I can leave everyone with. First, take inventory. So just, mind, body, spirit. And ask yourself, if you were to rate yourself from 1 to 10 with how you feel your mental and your mindset health is, where would it be? Okay. If it's a 3 out of 10, 10 being the best, that's an area you want to focus on. Body, do you have energy? Do you feel strong? Are you prone to injury? So when you rate yourself, you're taking inventory. Now you're aware, and now decide. So let's say you pick an area that you want to focus on. Now, some ambitious people like me would say, I'm going to pick one thing for each category, but my challenge to everyone is to commit and develop a self-care ritual. And it can start off super, super simple. So one thing I would notice is in the morning, this is like 4 months ago, whether or not I was motivated to get out of the house right away and go to the gym was how stiff my body felt. Because I'm 50 years old now, right? And I did a lot of damage to my body, even with all the bodybuilding. Right. I would feel stiff in the morning. So I would, spend an hour moving around, doing other things, and then all of a sudden my motivation would wane. And I realized, well, if you're feeling stiff in the morning, what can you do about that? We have a hot tub. Mm-hmm. So I created a ritual where within the first 15 minutes of getting up, I go straight to the hot tub and I sit in there for 10 minutes. And then while I'm there, I'm stacking another habit, and I'm listening to, it ranges, whether it's Brendan Burchard and the Growth Day app or it's the Bible app, but I'm listening. I'm controlling what I'm consuming. So I don't get on my phone and start, going through social media, because now I'm not in control. Right. I'm going to get exposed to whatever's in front of me. But that's an example of how I just set one new habit. And honestly, that got me to the gym a lot faster, because then my body felt great. And I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go sweat. So I would say take inventory and then create a self-care ritual based on what you want to prioritize first. And if you want to do one of each, come up with one habit. And your first commitment is just to be consistent. That's it. And then make progress over time.
May I ask, what would be considered consistent? When do you know you can progress?
So consistent is, are you getting results? Okay. If you are not getting results, a lot of times it's because you're not consistent enough. So here's a great example. Back when I was a trainer and a nutritionist, someone would come to me and they're saying, I'm just not losing weight. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about what you're doing. So how's your eating? My eating's pretty good. I'm like, okay. So we would keep, again, being curious. Tell me more about that. Let's dive in deeper. Let's break down exactly what you're eating. Then I would ask them to track what they're eating. Now, that's the ultimate for mindfulness, because now you're being accountable to yourself. There's proof. You're writing it out. And what I found is that when people tracked their habits or what they were doing, they realized that their perception of what they were doing and the reality of what they were doing
We're not aligned.
it was not aligned. And all of a sudden they're like, you know what? So I thought that I was probably eating 4 out of 5 healthy meals a day. And it was really just 2, because when in the afternoon I would eat this, and then I would snack on this, and then I'd have this dessert. And I said, multiply that by 6 days. And, now you know why you're not getting results.
Right.
It just wasn't consistent enough. So that's why I don't tell people it has to be 90% or 80%. It's really, are you consistent enough that you're getting results? And if you're not, and here's the thing that's not great for us, but, as women that are over the ages of 40, 50, we go through menopause. So the things that we did in our 20s and 30s, they're not working anymore.
Right.
It's annoying. Right. So again, part of my mindset shift with that, I can spend a lot of time being disappointed and irritated and maybe even give up because now I'm letting this excuse get in the way. No, part of my mindset training is acceptance. That's one of my tools is what do I need to tap into right now? Acceptance. I need to accept that I'm 50 years old. I'm perimenopausal. My hormones are going to be challenged. So now I'm going to stop expecting the same result as when I was 30 years old. I'm a different person. So that helps, right? So now I come up with a new game plan that makes room for where I'm at right now. And a lot of people don't do that, but we need to teach them how to do that.
So take inventory.
Yes.
Decide and create a self-care ritual. Excellent. This has been fantastic. Is there anything that we didn't cover or an example that you want to share for our listeners in really thinking about how wellness touches our lives in all capacities, and especially it's really relevant in leadership as well?
It is relevant in leadership, and I think that's where I want to end, because where I feel compelled and where I'm often disappointed, let's say if I go into a corporation and, I live in Seattle, so we're the home of Amazon. So I know a lot of people that work at Amazon. And, let's say I'm talking to them about, just how are they doing? And most people are stressed and they're burnt out and they're not happy. And, my first thought is your leadership aware? And if they are aware, why aren't they doing anything about it? And you know why they're not?
Because they haven't shared it?
Because they're not well either, right? And so one of the things I love and appreciate that I learned from being in the Air Force is the importance of leadership by example. So what motivates me in all that I do, when you come to me and you say, Tanji, how are you? So earlier today, General Mark said, Tanji, how are you? And I said, honestly, I am well. I'm well. I feel good. I've got great energy. I'm happy. I stay in a place of gratitude. I'm high functioning. I feel well, right? Because I've developed all these skills and habits and I'm extremely mindful. So I want our leaders to be well so that they can recognize when the people that they are shepherding are not well. And now they can be a part of the solution and not the problem.
Right. Wow. This has been excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, my goodness. Well, this wraps it up for this edition of Focus on Leadership. A big thank you to Tanji Johnson Bridgeman for sharing her story and insights on the vital connection between wellness and leadership. Her reminder that resilience, presence, and even failure, feedback, are part of the path to success gives us something to carry in our own leadership journeys. We're hoping you walk away with practical tools to strengthen yourself and those you lead. So join us next time as we continue to learn from the experience of our Long Blue leaders. I'm Naviere Walkewicz. Thanks for joining me. Tanji, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time. We'll continue welcoming accomplished United States Air Force Academy graduates to uncover the how behind the why of effective leadership. You won't want to miss these valuable lessons from experts in their fields, so be sure to subscribe to Long Blue Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts.